Welcome back to the channel. Today we're here talking about the Championship. We're back with the Championship content. I'm going to be bringing you 5 teams that I think you should look out for this season in the Championship, whether it be for good reasons, for bad reasons, whether I think this team can shock a few people going into this season. We've got 5 teams that I've looked in depth in regarding signings and how they will do this season. So before we get going in today's video, if you'd like to see more Championship content on the channel, make sure to get down there and click the red subscribe button. We're on the road to 28,000 subscribers, and without further ado, let's get talking about my first team. Charlton Athletic is the first team I want to talk about now. I've looked at loads of predictions from, the bookies, outlets regarding the Championship this season, and loads of them seem to have Charlton Athletic right down at the bottom of the table. But in my opinion, I think they could surprise a lot of people this season, and I don't think they're going to go down now. You look at last season in League One, yes, it's a completely different league in terms of quality, finances, just everything. It's probably the biggest gap in the EFL in divisions. But in that second half of the League One season, the momentum they gained in that second half, the run they went on under Nathan Jones, from a mid-table team to getting promoted in the playoff final, will no doubtedly have an impact on the players going into pre-season, and the players coming into the club will feel the euphoria and just feel the togetherness in the squad that they did build, obviously, across the second half of the season. In that season, they had 16 wins in the second half of it. Something just seemed to really click for Nathan Jones, and I think, obviously, speaking on him like a manager who's dedicated to the project that they're trying to build at Charlton Athletic, signing a new 5-year contract, getting them playing some really good football in the second half of that season. Obviously, Jones knows where the club wants to be. The owners know they're pumping the money in to get the right players across the line for them to be competitive in the Championship this season. We're going to be looking at the signings next, but I think they're in to surprise a few people. Thomas Kaminski, Amari Bell, Reece Burke, Sonny Carey, Tanto Alafe have all been added to the Charlton squad in the first, sort of area of the transfer window, and they're all good signings. They're all hits, no misses in there in my opinion. Of course, it's easy to judge, but you're looking at the signings there. Nathan Jones has brought in the experience, had the likes of Kaminski, Amari Bell, whilst also adding Sonny Carey and Alafe, who are still relatively young in terms of their playing career, but have gained Championship experience previously. Of course, we've seen Tanto Alafe play for Millwall, we've seen Sonny Carey play for Blackpool in the Championship, so they're bringing in youth and experience into one in those signings, which I really like, and I think the business that they have done so early on has been really, really good. Of course, they've got all the names they want to get in across the line ahead of their pre-season tour, so I think it's some really good bits of business from Nathan Jones and Charlton. And there's still players like Sonny Carey, Alafe, who could have resale value, who they could sell on for possibly double what they paid for them if they do have a really good time at Charlton Athletic. So they're really logical signings, and I think also they've retained some really key players from last season, so I'm sure they'll want to obviously build on the squad as they go on. Of course, 2 or 3 new signings probably are expected at Charlton, and you're looking at their home form as well. They're going to want to make the Valley an absolute fortress for teams coming there this season. Moving on to the next promoted team I want to talk about, Birmingham City. Now, we've all seen so far the calibre of players that Birmingham can attract, and it looks as if they're going to be aiming for back-to-back promotions to the Premier League this season. Now, in my opinion, the recruitment for the Championship realistically started last year in League One. They were bringing in players for multi-million-pound deals. They were bringing in players that were Championship quality in League One, of course. I think this was quite smart, because I'm sure a lot of the players they have signed in League One they got for relatively good prices, because, of course, following the promotion to the Championship, if they wanted to bring those calibre of players in now, I think the price would have gone up a slight bit. So they did really well to recruit the players they did when they were in League One, and they invested in players who would be at the club for 3-4 years time, and they brought in players that they know could compete in the Championship. I think it was fairly obvious Birmingham City were not going to spend more than 1 season in League One, and they blew the whole league away with obviously the signings, the points tally, just the form they were on under Chris Davies last season. And you're looking at some of the signings they made in League One: Jay Stansfield, Christopher Clara, Paik, Iwata. In my opinion, they were the best performing signings for Birmingham City last season, and bringing in a manager like Chris Davies, who gained some really good experience under Ange at Tottenham Hotspur, they just seem to get everything really right. And I think for a League One side, no matter what the stature of the club is, it was some really good bits of business on and off the pitch, and a lot of money they have spent on signings have just been really strategical ones. Of course, we've seen in the Championship now some of the players they have signed in League One are more than capable of performing there, and going into this season, I think they had a squad that was going to be competitive in the Championship already, possibly pushing for top half, but their signings that they've made now in the summer transfer window, in my opinion, has got them as definite favourites for promotion, and Birmingham City fans should be having their expectations of them possibly being in the playoffs, if not automatic promotion this season. Tommy Doyle, Damari Gray, Furuhashi, Newman are just some of the bigger names that they've managed to recruit so far in the transfer window. They're all players as well that are still relatively young in their playing career that can still give you a good 2, 3, 4, 5 seasons ahead of them. And I think it's not even unrealistic to say that Birmingham could go the rest of the transfer window without signing anyone and could still be favourites for promotion to the Premier League. Of course, they've got a good, young, attacking-minded manager. They've got a very tough place to go to in St Andrews next season, which you'll have 30,000 fans in there. It's a really good place to be at the minute. Obviously, being a Birmingham fan, being a Birmingham player, you're going to feel that togetherness and, like I said at Charlton, the euphoria around the place and just that feeling of they can do back-to-back, because I think there is a lot of pointers towards Birmingham possibly, defining expectations from the start of the transfer window to now going into next season and wanting to be up there for promotion to the Prem. Hull City is the next team I want to talk on now. It's not really, the positive talk we've just had on Birmingham City. It's not a great time to be a Hull City fan, and I do quite worry for them this season. Of course, we've seen the transfer embargo that has been placed on the Tigers, meaning that they can only make free transfer signings for the next 3 transfer windows until January of 2027, which is a massive, massive blow, considering you look at last season, they survived by the skin of their teeth on the last day of the season. This season, I can see it being slightly worse for Hull City. Of course, they've appealed this transfer embargo. Whether it will get rescinded or not, we really don't know, but as things stand, that is a massive, massive blow for the club, and they're really limited to what players they can sign on a free transfer. There's only a limited pool of players that are going to be competitive in the Championship next season that can help you compete and survive like they want to do. I'm sure that'll be their aims, obviously, after hearing the news of the transfer embargo. And any players they sell as well is just completely pointless, because they can't reinvest those funds into the squad to buy players, because obviously we've seen they're not allowed to. So it's going to be a really interesting season to see what happens at Hull City, of course, in terms of how they do in the table, in terms of recruitment. We've seen the likes of Dylan Phillips come in. I think John Joe Shelby has jetted out on their pre-season tour, so I think they're able to recruit good players who obviously have experience, but like I said, there is a limited number of players that you can sign that are going to have resale value, and of course that are able to compete for you in the Championship next season. And I know it's in the past now, but getting rid of Ruben Sellés, of course, at the end of last season was a really weird decision, especially because they just appointed him months prior. He'd kept them up in what was a very underperforming team, and I think it was going to be hard for him to come in and completely flick the switch and get results going. They survived, and I think a full transfer window, of course, we've seen the embargo now, but he's worked in that situation before for Reading. I think he is a very good manager, and considering we've seen where he is now at Sheffield United, where he's at an environment where they're expected to be at the top end of the Championship table, I'm sure they'll be kicking their teeth. They've replaced him with a Bosnian manager, so it's going to be interesting to see how that one goes. They've got some decent players in the squad, and under the new manager things might go slightly better. They might obviously install different tactics, environment and a philosophy going into next season, and I think this pre-season is massive for Hull City. Of course, they're going to be with sort of the same squad. Of course, there'll be 3, maybe 4 signings coming through the door, so the players will all know each other, and it'll be interesting to see how they do this season without the ability to sign players, of course, on transfer fees or on loan from higher up clubs. So yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting situation. Let me know in the comment section down below how you think Hull City will do this season. So back onto a positive team, and a team that I think will have a very positive season, Coventry City. Now, I know they had a good second half of the season, but I think this season is going to be a very exciting one for Cov fans, because you're looking at Frank Lampard coming in November 2024, only having that short January transfer window, obviously, to get the players he wanted, and he didn't have that full pre-season, that full summer with him. And you're looking now, he's going to have obviously that full pre-season with his squad, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 games with them under the belt, the new signings coming in. I think it's a really exciting time, like I said, to be a Coventry City fan, and you're looking at how well Lampard did when he came in, how quickly he implemented his style of play, his philosophy, how he wanted his Coventry City team to obviously perform on a weekly basis. 17 wins since joining them. So he turned them into a real unit of a team, taking them from the bottom end of the table to the playoff semi-final, where they narrowly missed out in the playoff semi-finals. And I think for Frank Lampard, of course, seeing his sort of failure, you could say, at other clubs like Everton, he didn't really perform too well. Chelsea in his second stint, and overall I don't think there was a lot of thought going into this thinking Frank Lampard is going to be a really good manager. Of course, he had that good spell at Derby, and I think coming to Coventry City and showing that he can succeed under a real amount of pressure from the Coventry fans, I think shows that he's sort of found his level. And I think if he is to go to a slightly smaller team with lower expectations, if Coventry were to go up to the Premier League, I think Frank Lampard would do better. I don't think he's a manager that suits those big environments like Chelsea, like Everton, so I think he's a really good fit for the Coventry job, and rightly so. He has done a really good job, and I think going into the transfer window this season in terms of signings, he will know exactly what he wants. His scouts will know, he will know, and he won't sign players for the sake of it. They've got a good squad, a good performing squad last season, and it'll all be about bringing players in who are going to compete for their spot. We've seen the new fullbacks come in, one from Spain and Kesler Hayden from Aston Villa, so I think he, like I said, he's obviously going to bring players in not for the sake of it, and just bring players in who he thinks are going to maximise the potential and the ability of this Coventry City squad. And I think in terms of retaining players, Lampard will have a huge role in that, because I'm sure there's a lot of Coventry City players that will be looking at Lampard and thinking, he has got the best version out of me, and if I'm to leave this football club, will I perform better than I did at Coventry? From that opening stint of the season under Mark Robins to just completely going up and up in the Championship. I think the two players that are going to stand out for me, I know it's cliche, but you're looking at Jack Rodoni, Sakamoto. I think they're the players that you need to look out for this season that I think will really flourish like they did last season. Rodoni as well, really coming into his own, especially when Lampard did come into Coventry. 23 goals and assists in the Championship last season, by far his best season to date in his career, and I think there'll definitely be a lot of interest in Rodoni in the transfer window, but if they can retain him, that'll be an unreal bit of business. The feeling inside the Coventry City Society Arena at the minute is sky high, and I think they could be in for a very good season. So they're my team to definitely look out for this season. Finishing off with Sheffield Wednesday. Now, like Hull City, I really do worry for what the future holds for Wednesday. It is a very important week for them. Multiple players can walk away from the contracts from the club if they are not paid this week. Players are being sold to raise funds. Danny Roll has returned to training at the Owls, but players don't want him in charge. Some of the players inside that squad do not want Danny Roll at the football club. And on the slightly more positive side, there's talks of a US businessman coming into Sheffield Wednesday to take over and ultimately save the football club. So it is a massive couple of weeks for Sheffield Wednesday. We don't obviously want to see them continuing this really poor situation, because they're being run horrifically by Chansiri, and the EFL don't really seem to be doing too much about it. Let's hope that they can get the takeover sorted, because it's a historical football team, it's a historical stadium, it's a team and a club that is rich in history, and to see them in this situation like they are, they owe £2.2 million to HMRC, £1.6 million is owed in player wages. Brighton and Hove Albion, Hull City, Norwich City and Southampton are all still owed money from previous loans and transfers. So it's a situation that no club should be put through, and I think if nothing really is resolved in the next coming weeks, and if this takeover does fall through, it's going to be a very messy situation for Sheffield Wednesday. And you're looking as well, if Danny Roll leaves the football club, ultimately he kept them up last season, he got the best out of a very mediocre squad, and if the players continue to walk away, we've seen multiple links of key players possibly leaving the club, then I don't think it is going to be much of a surprise to see Sheffield Wednesday go down this season. Of course, we don't want to see them in this situation, the financial situation that they're in. Hopefully it can get resolved, and hopefully we can see a very positive start, obviously going into pre-season and into the Championship season for Sheffield Wednesday. Let's keep our fingers crossed that this takeover can go through. So yeah, that is it for today's video. If you did enjoy, make sure to drop a like, make sure to subscribe, so like I said, if you would like to see more Championship content. And until the next video, take care guys.